Dave Boucher with us here. He's the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Dave, we apologize. As we were saying, we're building a new set and kind of testing it out today. You're a guinea pig for us.
Hey, it's all good. It's not a problem at all. I understand.
Happy post-Valentine's Day to you, and also early Snowmageddon.
Yeah, thank you. It's and President's Day as well. It's quite a Monday.
I know. I will say I kind of miss being a federal employee because we always got these days off. And I remember my first President's Day with the ATF. I went to work. No one was there.
Yeah, I get that.
We don't get those days off in news.
Indeed, we do not.
And speaking of news, oh my God, like just when we think things are calming down, they don't calm down. Can we talk about the Senate Majority Leader, Mike Shirkey? What is he thinking?
Yeah, obviously, like you're saying, the news of last week was a video that leaked of a meeting that he had with some Hillsdale County Republicans where he was recorded saying all sorts of things, chiefly that he thought aspects of the insurrection on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol were staged or a hoax. But he also got a lot of attention for saying that he contemplated challenging Governor Whitmer to a fistfight on the lawn of the Capitol. And he used, what many people consider misogynistic language to talk about how he bested her. I'm not going to say it, but how he bested her in legislative negotiations. So on top of all that, he had a hot mic moment in the Senate after that where he seemed to double down and say that he still agreed with the sentiment of what he was saying, even if he might have chosen different words in retrospect. So yeah, that's been the focus, at least of some at the Capitol and in politics this last week.
I will say, so sometimes I do media training as well. And one thing we always try to teach people is a mic is going to be hot somewhere. And you should know that. And knowing that, you should limit and edit your words and everything you say, especially as an elected leader, because what you say is off the tables. It's going to be shared. You need to know that in today's day and age. So I'm looking at this. Is he going to survive?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I think he will. I mean, it's to your point, I'm sure that he has gotten media training. He has been a lawmaker for a long time. He was the head of the Senate last session. He was in the House before he was in the Senate. We haven't seen one Senate Republican man or woman come out and say something, that they were offended or that they disagreed. We've seen the House Speaker come out and say he's a Republican, say that he disagreed with the Senate Majority Leader's thoughts on the insurrection, says that it distracts from the work of the legislature. But no, we haven't seen any movement at all from the Republican Party or from Senate Republicans in any way to even discuss whether or not he is the appropriate person to be leading the Senate.
So do you expect, though, that in the coming days, it's going to gain traction, or is this going to go away?
I don't think it'll gain traction. We'll see. It came up last week and obviously gained international attention, and yet there weren't any resolutions filed by lawmakers to, call out his wording or to call on him to, step down. There was obviously the Michigan Democratic Party called on him to resign over something completely different, actually, over his contact with so-called militias. It was mentioned in a New York Times story that was kind of a recap of everything that local media had been reporting on with him and with the pandemic and with the plot to allegedly kidnap the governor. But no, we haven't seen a ton of traction. I am confident that Senate Republicans hope that this dies down and that this goes away, and that they can sort of reframe the narrative again to this idea that they think that the governor is unilaterally trying to fight COVID on her own. But no, I think I'm going to keep reporting on it. I know lots of other people in the Capitol Press Corps will continue to report on this. It's an issue that a lot of people are interested in.
Some of these things, it really is just kind of surprising to me, like some of the issues that will gain traction to where it does lead for people stepping down, and other ones that seem to be even more offensive that it's like, okay, and they move on. Is it just an issue of what else is going on? Because obviously we had, in Washington, D.C., there was all the focus on the Trump impeachment trial, but also COVID relief is still a big issue that hasn't been worked out with our lawmakers.
Yeah, there's to your point, there's a lot of moving parts with policy. There's a lot of ongoing debates about how best to spend billions of dollars in federal relief aid to fight the pandemic. That hasn't gone away. Their negotiations are supposedly ongoing, although we don't know the status of that. I would say, and this was pointed out by one of my colleagues, a reporter at the Associated Press, but I think a lot of other people agree with this, is that if there was a huge sentiment in the Senate Republican caucus that they disagreed with Senate Majority Leader Shirkey's comments that aspects of this insurrection were a hoax or staged, we would have seen it. We haven't seen that. So the idea that you can remove someone from leadership for a concept that you might not disagree with, I think is part of why we haven't seen more of an outcry here about the comments that Senate Majority Leader Shirkey has made. And to be clear, and you know this, and I'm sure your listeners and viewers do too, this is not the first time he said something that a large swatch of the electorate might have found offensive. He's been called out for so-called xenophobic comments about how he's classified the coronavirus. He used an expletive and called the governor crazy back in April. This is not new rhetoric from him, and we haven't, again, seen Senate Republicans or Republican Party officials at the state or county level, apart from the Hillsdale County Republicans, really call him out.
Dave Boucher with us here on the MegaCast. He is the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. And with that, Dave, I have to say, is this just one of those things where they say, yeah, it's Shirkey?
It might be. It totally might be. I think, again, we're going to keep reporting on it. I think the big question that came out after the January 6th insurrection nationally was how businesses and political donors will react when people espouse potentially dangerous rhetoric. So the morning after his comments were released on video, Senate Majority Leader Shirkey had a fundraiser for his political action committee. I went and stood outside, as did a couple of other reporters, to see if we could talk with the leader. He declined to comment, but we saw who some of these gold sponsors, so the big name, big money sponsors were, and I've reached out to all of them. DTE Energy was listed as a gold sponsor. Their spokesperson said that they didn't sponsor the event and they didn't know what he was talking about. So that was interesting. But and I spoke to another person who represents builders and construction employees in the state, and he had an interesting take on, I don't agree with what he said, but he's the most powerful Republican in state government. He's a leader in the Senate, and he has been good on our issues, which is something that you heard a lot during the Trump presidency as well, right? You might not agree with what he's saying, or you might not want to be his friend, frankly, but he has a lot of political power and a lot of political sway that could help you and your constituency. So that, I think, is also part of this dynamic.
Yeah, and I wonder too, as when we're talking about the political process and donating to some of the parties, but also these individuals, some of these big companies can hide between these PACs or behind the PACs when they're donating to certain individuals. And we should keep in mind, a lot of times they're playing both sides of the aisle.
Sure. The biggest companies, tend to donate to everyone. There have been a lot of statements post, again, the January 6th insurrection, where companies say that they're going to discontinue political contributions either to members who voted against accepting the Electoral College votes or just in general. DTE says that they have stopped all political contributions since January 6th while they reevaluate what they're going to do. This is one of those, it's right after a political cycle. There's still 2 years for all these companies to decide it is in their best interest to continue to donate tens of thousands, if not more, dollars to these political leaders. But yeah, it's something that we're going to continue to watch, and it'd be a shock if big money didn't start flowing back into political coffers in the very near future.
And look, we all know it's not going away. They'll continue to donate. They'll find a different way to do it, or you just wait long enough to where people's attention is, focused someplace else. Because these big businesses, they know that's kind of how they get some of their policies passed and are not only elected, but in DC as well. And a lot of people will argue that's one of the big issues with our political process. With that too, though, I have to ask, I know the last time we had you on, we were talking about the former health department here in the state of Michigan. Any new information that you can share with the quick departure of Gordon?
Yeah, so as you noted, Robert Gordon was the head of the health department. He resigned in something that was seemingly a surprise move. And the department almost immediately announced his replacement, who's a longtime senior executive at the health department. We're still reporting it out. There is more information that's coming out. I know that we're working to get more information out there, as are many other reporters. But the feedback that I'm getting from lawmakers and others is that they thought that the former director, Gordon, didn't listen as well as he could have. He didn't take feedback as well as he could have, and that there are stronger relationships with the legislature with the new acting director, Elizabeth Hertel. She has a confirmation hearing next week, essentially a confirmation hearing next week in the state Senate. It's before the Senate Advice and Consent Committee. The Senate has to sign off on these appointments. In the last couple of weeks, the Senate has decided at least a few times to reject gubernatorial appointments as like a show of exerting their power and as like a legislative way of saying that they want to be included in COVID talks. We don't know that that's going to happen with the head of the health department, but obviously, appointments have been a concern for the governor. So that'll be an interesting hearing to see.
Oh, well, and we should also mention that her husband is an elected leader as well. But with that, it's like you said, both people on both sides of the aisle said that they've had a better working relationship with her. But with that, have you been able to figure out, or any members of your team been able to figure out, with Gordon, did he leave with any type of severance package?
Yeah, we're looking into that. We're still looking into that now. We know that, as is the case with many, if not most, government employees, he was an at-will employee, so he wasn't on a contract. But he had an employment agreement, obviously, and so we are looking more into that. We will have something out soon. We hope that will kind of delve into that a little bit more about him and the leadership and the circumstances surrounding his departure.
You're listening to 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM The Biff. We're speaking with Dave Boucher. He is the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. And I know that a lot of politicians like to talk about transparency, but we also know on the backside, when you submit a FOIA, for those that don't know, a FOIA is Freedom of Information Act. It is not just for reporters, it's for the general public. Sometimes even when you submit one of those, there are a lot of hoops that come along with actually trying to get the results, and also a cost involved in trying to get a response to a FOIA.
Yeah, that's right. It's all the information that your government has was paid for by you with tax dollars. And in order to get a lot of that information, you need to submit a request and pay more money to get taxpayer funded documents. So, and this is just in general, this is not in relation necessarily to former Director Gordon, but yeah, it's an ongoing concern and a frustration. And I know that my colleagues, both at the Free Press and at other papers, have written at length about legislative efforts to either increase transparency or talk about transparency, and they tend to not go anywhere. For example, to your point, the legislature is not subject to state open records laws, which means that if I put in a request for memos from, one state lawmaker's office to another, they don't have to tell me about it. They don't have to meet open records or Open Meetings Act requirements that indicate who's going to testify at a meeting 3 days in advance. There are all sorts of open records and open meetings law policies that apply to almost every aspect of state government except for the legislative branch and the governor's office. So that's something that has been talked about. Lawmakers have talked about changing that. Again, it's another one of those believe it when you see it sort of issues.
Yeah, we've had Representative Berman on with us a few times, and he's been pushing for the transparency. And it's like you said, a lot of politicians like to talk about it, but yet when it actually comes to passing anything, nothing is being done. And we like to remind them that it's not their information, it's our information. And as a former member of the federal government, you know that every time you send an email, that's open to a FOIA request. Even in a law enforcement capacity. Of course, there are certain things that you can and cannot divulge, but these individuals should know that that is one of those things out there, but they're being paid by us, the taxpayers, and we deserve that right And also it shouldn't come with that huge bill. I've put in FOIAs before and you come back and it's like, sure, you can have that. It will take like 6 weeks to put that information together and cost you like $12,542. So that's kind of one way that they get around that. Dave, I'm really though interested, where do you think Michigan's GOP party goes from here on out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's been a change in leadership. Laura Cox, who was chair for the last 2 years, is out. Ron Weiser, who was previously the chairman of the party before, is now in. It was a surprisingly contentious election. Everybody thought that Laura Cox was not going to run again. And then a few days ahead of the election, she announces that she is going to run, but only so that Ron Weiser can't become chairman because she thinks that he was involved in some untoward acts that may have been in violation of state campaign finance regulations, to the point where she referred some of this spending to the state elections bureau. The allegations were that he paid somebody not to run for Secretary of State in 2018, a Republican candidate. Ron Weiser won the election of the party pretty overwhelmingly. Something like 2/3 of all votes were for him. And after he took over, they sent a letter to the State Elections Bureau saying, we were just kidding. Everything we did was fine. We're formally withdrawing our party's request for an investigation. And the state essentially said, like, that ship has sailed. We're looking into this. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think that that's indicative of like a interesting transition for the party, and that there's a kind of a grappling for power within the party between the people who think that they need to continue to support former President Trump and his initiatives and his ideas, and others in the party who can't wait to get away from President Trump and answering questions about his comments and his statements and his rhetoric.
Dave, just about 20 seconds left with you here on the Mega Cast. What's it been like for you to try to keep up with the politics here in the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit?
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose, but that's what we signed up for. So I don't mind it at all. It's been interesting. It's been exciting. I've learned a lot, and I've definitely appreciated the experience.
And there is no break even during COVID.
Never, but that's okay.
Dave Boucher with us here on the MegaCast. He is the government and politics reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Follow him, subscribe to the Free Press, and support local journalism. You're so important, especially now in the middle of the pandemic.